Good morning, everybody. My name is Stuart Chokrelli. I lead our tax practice here in the UAE. I'm very pleased to welcome you to our Trade and Customs webinar this morning. Now, today's webinar underlines the importance of trade facilitation as a main component of a robust supply chain. We're going to look at two new tools which have been introduced by the authorities here. The first one is relating to international road transport, and the second one is a blockchain-based clearance platform for certain e-commerce consignments. These tools have been introduced in the UAE to assist businesses and optimize the supply chain. Very pleased to introduce our speakers, Pascal and Thijs, who will present to you these tools, the requirements to benefit from these tools, and obviously answer any questions that you might have. And then Pascal and Thijs are key members of our Trade and Customs team here in the UAE. With that, I'll pass it over to Pascal and Thijs, and hope this is an informative session. And with that, Pascal, pass to you.
Thanks a lot, Stuart. Hello, everybody. Good morning. It is a great pleasure to meet you all. And to accompany you through what should be around 50 minutes of a approach on two recent facilitation tools put in place, one by the Federal Customs Authority in the UAE, and the other one by Dubai Customs. As you all know, we have been witnessing lots of changes recently to the general tax and customs environment in the GCC, from changes in duties, COVID measures, to facilitate the clearance, specific clearance in relation to the tracing of the vaccines, etc. So lots of changes, bringing lots of optimizations and opportunities, but also lots of challenges as well. So for those of you I didn't have the pleasure to meet yet, my name is Pascal Conge. I look after customs and trade in the Middle East, and my colleague Thijs Cunha also works on customs and trade. We will be guiding you through the TIR process and the e-commerce clearance blockchain-based platform. However, ahead of this, I would just like to present to you some housekeeping items. If we can go to next slide, please. So basically, if you have any question throughout the presentation, feel free to submit it in the Q&A column to the right. We will be collecting these questions in order to answer them in the Q&A part of the presentation at the end. Your feedback is quite valuable to us, and by the end of this session, basically when you log off, a pop-up for a feedback, it takes 1 minute. It's precious to us to understand what are your expectations and what type of other topics you would be interested in, and how we can present in order to help you better. Please bear in mind that this session will be recorded because it will be shared with other firms where now, I mean, with the time gap that does not allow them to attend it live, right? So if we can go to the next slide, and if we go to the content, we will walk you through a small background on customs facilitation as it was pushed. Of course, it's a global approach. It's led by WTO, WCO. We will see it on the global scale, and then we will go to our markets in the GCC and the GCC countries. On the second side, we have the Dubai Customs facilitation tools, where we're going to detail a little bit the international road transport and the e-commerce clearance platform. On the third part, we will basically just display to you very quickly what type of support we provide and where you will need to understand that there is a sort of a risk and but also there is benefit. Finally, we will finish with a Q&A session where we will go through your questions that you have kindly shared with us in the Q&A session, in the Q&A column, as mentioned earlier. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So on the background, next. So just a little bit of history, a little bit on facilitation. What is trade facilitation? You know, it's quite interesting to tackle supply chain and changes in supply chain when basically we're talking about costs, the duties. How can I pay less duties? How can I benefit of free trade agreements, etc. But also, it is very important to emphasize on the fact that there is a cutting edge advantage that can be achieved in the supply chain world through the facilitation and the fluidity of your good. Basically, the WTO started thinking about this in the 1996 in the Singapore ministerial conference. They laid down the facilitation and they defined it. What is facilitation? Yes, it's nice to see something that's facilitated, but how can we break it down? So they came up with 4 concepts that the drivers of trade facilitation should be transparency, simplification, harmonization, and standardization. Transparency between all the stakeholders, the authorities included. Simplification of the administrator. For example, one of the biggest item would be the administrative burden. The harmonization, you will see what the TIR accomplishes, and one of the main advances to it, for example, is to harmonize the treatment and provide the customs authority with a space where they can exchange. And standardization, which is the everlasting effort done by WTO, but also by WCO, so World Trade Organization and World Customs Organization, on the standardization of the regulations. Most of you know that when you go from one jurisdiction to the other and you look at the customs law, these laws look like each other's. They look like they come from the same place. This is all as a result of the efforts between the WCO and the WTO. So if we go into the negotiations that took place, in 2004, the WTO members agreed to launch the negotiations. The agreement was entered into effect in 2017. Well, you know, because there needed to be 2/3 of the member states of the WTO signing this trade facilitation agreement. So this agreement was actually in force in 2017. In the meantime, most of the GCC countries had already joined the facilitation agreement. We give the example of the UAE in 2016, KSA as well, Bahrain, Qatar in 2017, and Oman, Kuwait in 2018. So basically, some of the countries joined the agreement before it entered into effect. Kuwait, for example, joined it after its entry into effect, but there is absolutely no problem of that, because the adoption and the drive towards all the facilitation techniques was being, in the meantime, pushed as well by the WCO with all the customs authorities of the member states. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So what about the future trends or the current and future trends actually of trade facilitation? We today stand at 154 ratifications. The approach that was put in place is the ratification was a token of acceptance. Most of the countries of the WTO actually believe in the value of facilitation. if we see that what is expected out of it is a reduction in costs between 12 to 18%, and basically a boost of up to 1 trillion US dollars per year. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So on the implementation, now that we understood what are the four pillars of the facilitation, how is it implemented in order to achieve each of these four pillars? So as you've been all noticing recently, there has been a wave of modernization on the border processes. All the automation that was taking place, the dematerialization of the paperless and all these items. So the put in place of non-intrusive inspection processes, so that your trucks will not be stopped for longer than they should, will not be opened more frequently than they need to. So basically, all these items actually serve as a great purpose in order to continue the fluidity of goods on borders and spend less time in the clearance processes. In addition to this, the customs authorities also put in place the pre-arrival processing, which basically means before you put your goods on a ship and put the ship on water and send your goods and waste time, energy, and resources. Basically, what you're able to do is be able to have visibility on the process through the pre-arrival processing. In some areas as well, the customs authorities will accept that your goods keep flowing, even if there is an objection somewhere. For example, we've seen this recently in Saudi Arabia, where there were objections to provide or to grant the GCC origin exemptions, but still the companies constituted guarantees and the goods were released. So there is always this approach where we cannot hinder the businesses, we cannot get goods to perish on the border, and we cannot not allow consumers to have access to actually these imported goods. So on the exchange of information as well, there has been lots of exchanges put in place. Most of the companies, we've been helping them on the connection of the ERP with the Dubai Trade Portal, in the ability to provide input into basically that is consistent with the type of information that is expected by the customs authorities and the stock report and the inventory management reports, etc. So all these measures enhanced controls, rendering it faster for authorities, more transparent for authorities, but also less burdensome for companies. And all these items have been operating one into the other in order to generate an enhanced basically facilitation. The latest trend that we have been seeing recently, both in the UAE and in the GCC also, but mainly in the UAE, it is the blockchain drive. The blockchain technology being one of the latest tools to provide connectivity of all the stakeholders at the same time in the same chain, but also basically its unviolability and the integrity of information that can be there was very, very important for it to be both clear, transparent, but also reliable for everybody on all the aspects of the transaction. So we have seen, I mean, recently the UAE Connect that was put in place by the FCA, and this tool has connected banks, has connected through Etisalat. It has connected, I think, by memory, around 13 banks in the UAE, and basically allows a holistic view of the transaction by the customs authorities. So if we can move to the next slide, please. On the trade facilitation indicators, what is very important to see, I mean, we went to the OECD a little bit to understand where we stand in terms of facilitation in comparison to the rest of the world. Where is the GCC, or for example, we took two markets because otherwise it would have been too burdensome. We took the UAE and KSA in order to understand basically where do we stand versus the best practices? And very frankly, we took the top 6 measures on 11. And if you see, we're quite aligned, if not sometimes, for example, for automation in the UAE, we're ahead. Sometimes we're perfectly aligned, sometimes we are almost aligned for KSA and the UAE. If we look now in the next slide on the OECD measures as well, the 5 bottom measures, we see that in here there are a little bit of enhancement that can be done, but in general we see that KSA is quite more or less aligned, a bit behind, but still aligned with the trend. In the UAE, on advanced ruling and governance impartiality of the authorities, the OECD sees that there are additional efforts to be done. From our personal experience with advanced rulings in the UAE, we never faced issues, but I'm sure the OECD has got a wider sampling process more than we see ourselves as a practice on the market. So all in all, in trade facilitation, that these 2 slides show us that in trade facilitation, we're quite close from the global best practices. So if you can move to the next slide, please. Now on the blockchain in the UAE, which is one of the main topics of today's presentation, the blockchain. Basically, if you see the cells in blue, these are the cells of the capability enhancement or the advantages that blockchain provides. And the ones in white are actually the initiatives that the UAE different government authorities put in place in order to capitalize on the advantages that we have around. So reduction of documentary use, consolidation and clearance of clearance steps, so lesser clearance steps, more reconciled inventory, duty exemption and reduction and in-service charges. We've seen this a lot in the COVID period as incentive to businesses. All these were driven by actually gave rise to initiatives based on the blockchain technology, and this is something that we're going to look in depth at. Maybe one last example on the blockchain technology is actually what happened on the traceability of the vaccines, because the vaccines were a very big health stake for most of the government and the UAE specifically. So they followed the supply of the vaccines religiously, and basically it was able to we were able to see across the board where the vaccines are coming from, when are they cleared, what are the origins, so that in most of the WTO countries, and actually it goes even beyond the WTO, because the TIR is actually a UN initiative, so United Nations initiative. So the approach on TIR, it's basically quite interesting, because it simplifies significantly, but also at the same time, while providing additional safeguards, which is behind a little bit of the success of this approach. So today, in a nutshell and in a couple of figures, 80,000 trucks per month circulate with a TIR carnet, which means under the TIR regime. It brings ease, security, reliability to the movement of goods. As we will see, the controls are much more summarized, but while being summarized, this doesn't harm the security and safety of the goods, basically. It's simply a way to operate more efficiently. The TIR carnet, we have around 1 million carnet issued per year. So if you go to the next slide, in order just to see a little bit what are the main advantages a little bit behind the TIR and its implementation. So first of all, security. It offers one guarantee that works in all the places of transit. So your goods basically will go from Oman to the UAE and then transit in the UAE and pass to Saudi Arabia, or the other way around. With TIR, you don't need to constitute a guarantee in each of the countries in which you pass. You use the one guarantee that you constitute at the initial obtention of the carnet, and this guarantee will be covering this transport all along. The TIR, even though it has been actually put in place by the UN, it is also part of the WCO safe framework, and the WCO actually encourages customs authorities into more communications, etc., namely in the framework offered by the TIR. It allows you to save money. Again, we pay once, we ship once. We don't have lots of clearance and administrative burdens, because the carnet is going to cover the whole control process. You have most of the customs authorities actually, because of the trust in this system, are basically provide specific lanes for trucks in order for the entry into the country. It enables it enables the passage quite faster. It enables lesser time of control and lesser frequency of control, therefore bringing us to the third point, which is the reduction of transportation CO2 emissions, because the trucks weight less, they queue less, so the trucks are not standing in queues and basically emitting CO2 in the air. The simplicity of this tool makes actually its success. It's a simple tool that the shippers can use, and this tool is basically simple to obtain by several authorities within the country. And this tool basically allows you to have all the benefits within the requirements of the shipments, actually, because there are as well safeguards. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So here we go on the implementation a little bit of the TIR around the world and whether this is interesting for the region. As we see, if we rule out Iraq, that is an interested country in TIR, we see that the TIR is basically covering most of Asia and the totality of Europe. Now, Southeast Asia, maybe due to geographic specificities and the fact that it's mainly constituted of islands, or it's interlinked with lots of sea transport, the TIR becomes less interesting there. But if you see where the biggest mass of land is, naturally TIR is as well. In North America, the TIR has not been implemented yet. It's basically they contracted, but they never implemented so far for Canada and the US. Mexico is an interested party today. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So we see with a little bit of, if we zoom into the region, we see that the only country that is always at the interest level, or actually we have two countries at the interest level, which is Iraq and Bahrain. Bahrain, because also it is disconnected, I mean, from the land, which basically makes road transport less interesting, maybe. Jordan is a TIR signatory, Kuwait is a TIR signatory, while the KSA, Oman, and the UAE had signed the TIR, but also they have implemented it. Now, the benefit of the implementation basically makes TIR as a common room of communication of the customs authorities of these three countries, right? So if we can move to the next slide, just on the centers where you can apply for it. for maritime, for air cargo, and for land. Now, one thing is quite interesting here, and some of you would probably have, well, raised the eyebrow, because if it's international road transport, why do we have maritime and air cargo? Because and the answer to this is because the TIR manages the international transport when you have a crossing of the border and when you have a road crossing of the border. Some parts of the transport can actually be done by air or maritime, as long as there is a crossing of the border and basically the transport is done. It can be multimodal, the way we call it in the shipping. So we have all these authorities that in the UAE that can deliver the carnet. We are quite in touch with the ATCUAE, which is the automobile club in the UAE, and actually we have close relationships with them on how the carnet is issued, and well, basically we can provide any aspects of of information that are required by our clients. So if we can move to the next slide, please. So how does it operate? Basically, it is a carnet. It's a physical carnet, the standard form. It's constituted of 6 vouchers, and for a maximum of 3 countries, because basically on each border crossing, we're going to provide the customs authorities with a TIR that they're going to take, stamp, sometimes return to you, sometimes not, basically based on the needs of the transport. The details is very the use of the TIR is very detailed throughout, but basically what we need to pay always attention to that it's quite it's basically on this. It's basically the parameter of implementation and the parameter of control are these vouchers. As long as you have the voucher and as long as you have the seal on your container, on your TIR approved container, you can normally pass. Now, of course, customs authorities keep a certain level of discretion in this, and they can provide a different treatment than, well, basically what you have usually or what is provided for. But in general, we have not seen lots of deviances from the TIR approach. So if we can go to the next slide, just to see in a flyover a little bit what happens in TIR. So on the first step is actually the purchase of the carnet, which is the guarantee. And you load the goods into the approved containers. Then, with the presence of a customs officer, the goods are inspected and sealed and ready for departure. So basically what happens, the seal is very important because it is this TIR and customs seal that will be checked. No longer check on the goods, no longer you stop, you open, etc. And no, so it will be only the control of the seal, and as long as the seal is untampered with, the customs authorities normally will not look further because they will be comfortable with the status that the goods would have been already controlled. So you go to this would basically be next step. It would be begin the journey and reach the transit. On the transit country, there will be a check of the seal and the carnet data, which means the voucher and the seal, as we said earlier. And then you cross the transit country, entry and exit. And then on the entry to the final destination, you also provide your voucher until you reach your destination. The seals will basically be broken at the end, and the TIR will be terminated. Well, before the termination, when they break the seal, actually there will be the control on the goods. So if we see here, the goods are not controlled except twice on the put or on the placement of the seal and on the breaking of the seal. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So in this process, basically what happens, what are the benefits and what are the dynamics of TIR? Do we need to constitute guarantees? Do we need to pay duties, etc.? In principle, TIR allows you a duty-free passage, and without any payment of duties, etc. Some exceptions exist, usually for excisable goods, which basically means the tobacco, its derivatives, the alcoholic beverages, etc. So the second parameter, and it's a key parameter for you and for the speed of crossing of borders, no inspection of the cargo by the customs authorities in the transit countries. They are only inspected by the consignment country and the arrival country, the destination country. The TIR goods are subject to national prohibitions and restrictions. Of course, when you are transporting goods that are subject to restrictions, basically the necessary authorities' approval needs to be had. And the customs authorities may perform inspections in case of suspicion. This is what we were mentioning before. Usually, the customs authorities will follow the TIR path, but in some cases, we have seen that if something raises the suspicion of the customs officer, then of course, customs has got the right to inspect at will, and this is part of their intrinsic nature. So for the next slide, please. This is a bit the last slide, and it's basically just a presentation of how the things happen. So if we take, for example, the model of goods that are loaded in Oman, so the purchase of the guarantee and the TIR carnet is done in Oman. The goods are loaded. Before the placement of the seal, the authorities would inspect the goods, and then the seal would be apposed on the TIR approved transportation, and basically it will be on the TIR vehicle also. So it will be sent across the border to the UAE. For example, if we see that if you're transporting, I don't know, medical equipment, the medical equipment need to have the authorization to go through or radioactive equipment or waste, etc. All these items, since they are restricted products, they need to be subject to the approval of the relevant authorities in the UAE. But otherwise, customs would not inspect the goods in the UAE as long as you have the carnet and the seals in place. Then in the UAE, no inspection. They cross the UAE and they reach the Saudi border. On the Saudi border, the seal is actually inspected again, and once the goods, once they are cleared, the seal will be broken, and basically the control will be done in Saudi Arabia. So this is a little bit in a nutshell how the flow takes place. So of course it's still a recent model. The benefit from it is quite important, and it's witnessed by the increased efficiency in the supply chain. But also what we need to pay attention to is that, yes, there are lots of requirements and needs for compliance in order to get access to this benefit. So with this slide, I conclude my presentation of the TIR. I give place to my colleague Taish on the e-commerce clearance platform. Taish, up to you.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Taish. I work with Pascal at the Trade and Customs function here at KPMG. And today we are going to talk a little bit about the new e-commerce platform that was put in place by the Dubai Customs. So as we all know, over the last couple of decades, the e-commerce idea and e-commerce platform have slowly crept into our daily lives. The history of e-commerce can be traced back to the 60s with the development of the data exchange without the interference of a human. So the concept of online shopping came a little bit later in '79 when Michael Odrick gave birth to the idea of the teleshopping. So the internet in the '90s gave a significant, like a big boost to the concept of e-commerce, and we saw some trends born like online marketplace, digital marketing, and social shopping. So the next big jump on e-commerce was last year with the global pandemic that has drastically changed the consumers' behaviors and have pushed people to make more and more purchases using electronic platform. So in the Middle East, the e-commerce market totals around $27 billion, and it's expected to experience a growth of 25% per year, which is much ahead of the global average. So across the whole Middle East region, Middle East and North Africa, KSA and UAE are the pioneers on the digital e-commerce, online retailing, and electronic marketplaces. So together with Egypt, they account for around 80% of the region e-commerce market. So here in the region, recent research has pointed out that 80% of the local youth shop online frequently, and 50% declared that they are shopping online more after the global pandemic. Another important data here is that after the pandemic, the total average transaction value for online shopping is 40% higher than the average value of shopping basket in a point of sale. So this means that people are shopping more online or making more expensive purchases online than when in the point of sale. Moving on to the UAE, as the slide is already showing. So the UAE is the biggest e-commerce market in the region. The e-commerce market has grown an average of 31% per year, reaching a number of $8.9 billion that it's expected to reach by 2022. So 40% of the consumers in the UAE have declared to purchase in foreign websites. The most visited websites are from the US, India, and China. And although the market was initially controlled by foreign e-commerce platform, currently has a strong local presence. And with the global pandemic, we have observed a shift in behavior as well from international brands that basically perceived an opening in the market, and they decided to, instead operating only via distributors, operating as well via e-commerce platforms. One important note about the behavior of the UAE residents here is that they spend an average of $122 per e-commerce transaction. So if you want to compare with other emerging and developed markets, the baskets are ranging between $22 and $76. So you can see that the UAE consumer buys more online. So moving forward to the next slide. Although the UAE and the GCC in general, it's a growing market, the e-commerce business here are facing many issues. So we have issues related to free zone companies with high compliance requirements concerning the inventory, movement of goods, storage, and tracking. Other regulatory issues, for example, free zones are not able to import locally. Foreign companies are also not able to import globally, and so on, and to import locally. And then we have as well this return policy that at the end of the day, either the e-commerce company or the consumer will be the one bearing the cost of duties in case of a return of goods. So if we can move to the next slide. Then Dubai Customs, looking to this issues, has tried to propose a solution. So this means that they launch this platform that is basically part of the UAE blockchain strategy, and it's solely focused on e-commerce transactions, and the registration is not mandatory. So although the solution is there, it's not mandatory, and will be up to business to actually choose to enroll to the platform or not. So we can move forward to next, and we are here to look a little bit on the requirements to be registered on this platform. So the first requirement is you have to be, the company needs to be established in the UAE. It needs to be either a free zone company, a local company, or a customs warehouse. So, and then as a second requirement, the company needs to be registered with Dubai Customs. Then the company, after registration with Dubai Customs, it needs to register the e-commerce activity in their Dubai trade platform. One important note is the activity doesn't need to be on your trade license. So this is a good advantage. So, and then by the last, you have to join the platform. We can move forward. So here we can see the type of goods that can be cleared via this platform. So the platform is made for the clearance of personal goods. Which goods are these? Are goods made for personal use. The value should not exceed 10,000 dirhams and should be in B2C transactions. So it's always good cleared in a transaction between a company and a person, either for import or export. And we can move. The type of declaration covered to clear those goods, we have the whole list. If you're already registered with Dubai Customs, or if you're already importer, exporter, you are familiar with the terms. You have the import from outside the UAE. We have the import to local from the free zone and from the customs warehouse, and you have the other way around. Moving forward. And what are exactly the benefits of this platform? We have the automatic processing of the customs declaration, refunds, and guarantees on the supply chain related to e-commerce transactions, exemption of service charges. Today, the service charges are around 15 dirhams to 100 dirhams. We have the facilitation of refunds of customs deposits and claim settlement. We have the 60 days window period for amending and canceling the customs declarations, which is really good and really important. We have the exemption of customs duties on goods valued at less than 300 dirham. Here we have an amendment to the de minimis value declared on the GCC, under the GCC law, which is around 1,000 dirhams. So the person clearing goods via the platform for goods that cost more than 300 and less than 1,000, we have to evaluate if it's better to clear the goods under the platform or just use the regular process. And of course, the claims for refunds on returns can be made within 60 days. So if you cancel a declaration in case of a return, you can request a refund of the duties paid. Moving on. So what are the proposed solutions for that this platform brought? So with respect to the high compliance requirements, we have the automation of the automatic processing of the declarations, which make the whole procedure easier. We have the canceling and amending of declarations with 60 days, allows people to accompany the fast movement of the e-commerce transactions. And of course, the difference, the clearance process becomes clear for transactions of this type. Then we have automated requests for refunds of customs deposits and etc. Related to regulatory issues, we can now see that free zone companies are able to import locally. But again, this is on transactions on the e-commerce perspective. The importer locally should always be a person. And it's possible to invoice based on an invoice issued by a free zone or local company on direct consignment. This means if goods come from outside, a local company can issue an invoice and clear this invoice in the name of the customer, of the person. And here, the final issue that was solved here is the absence of duty drawback, that now you can request for a refund within 60 days. We can move. Here we have just a little bit of a case study. We have e-commerce company based in the free zone. This e-commerce company sells personal goods, so means goods for personal use of value below 10,000 dirhams. And we have a customer based in the UAE doing a purchase using his laptop. In his laptop, he decided to buy a t-shirt costing 100 dirhams and a travel backpack, because he was expecting to travel abroad, for 2,000 dirhams. So due to the availability of the stock, the e-commerce company decided to do 2 different shipments. On the first shipment, for the t-shirt costing 100 dirhams, the company used the platform, the service charges were free, and the duties were exempt of duties. And for the second shipment, also cleared via the platform, the duties were paid on the backpack, and the service fees were free as well. The two shipments were cleared under the free zone to local declaration. Then on the second step, the customer locally decided that was not actually interested in the backpack. He decided to return this backpack. Since the return was made within 60 days, the company was able to do a declaration from local to free zone, clear the goods back, and receive, canceling the first declaration, and receive the duties related to the backpack back. So as you can see, this is a very good platform, and although it's not mandatory, it represents a great advance on the e-commerce for the region and provides a lot of solutions. We have information regarding the implementation status of the platform. It started at first as a pilot project with courier and express company. It moved to logistic companies, and now they're implementing with free zone companies to register. The registration will be in a case-by-case basis, issued by customs, and should be done by the customs. The evaluation is done by the customs happiness center. So with that, I thank you all, and I send back the presentation to Pascal.
Thanks a lot, Taish. So in a nutshell, I see that we are a bit behind on time, so I'm going to go very, very swiftly through the next slide. It's simply how we are able to support on situations like this to enhance the facilitation. So our support will consist of generating added value through increasing the fluidity and reducing significantly the interruptions and the circulations of the goods. So we can accompany and support the businesses in finalizing the registration processes, obtaining the documents in order to fill all the requirements in order to benefit from this from these specific clearance models, review and advise the compliance of new rules before the authorities. So also we are able to train the employees within your organizations in order to get this these models integrated and actually be able to get you to benefit from this through their day-to-day support. We can look at the supply chain and actually see how we are able to bring more efficiency, one with regards to the optimization, but two with regards to rendering it more efficient all in all. So facilitation is one of the tools of the enhancement of supply chain, but it's not the exclusive tool. Then we can conceptualize and create new policies, which is something that we do for our clients. Well, basically, in order to sometimes also we support this by flow charts in order to understand the processes, in order to benefit from these from these enhancements. So aware of the time, I can probably go to the Q&A, see what type of whether we have questions in the Q&A part. So, okay. So what are the main advantages for TIR compared to the customs, to the usual customs declaration? I see two things, right? So it's basically speed, non-interruption, but we can go to other items such as financial benefit, the environmental friendly approach. In addition to this, maybe last but not least, the benefit of light controls, where basically the controls are not intrusive, are not time consuming. There is always a way to keep your goods flowing. Imagine if your goods are flowing and the competitor's goods through regular customs processes are blocked. Basically, we would not be able. I mean, we would not. This will give you an edge technically on the market with regards to this. Is TIR only single load journey? No, actually, TIR is flexible. Can be used for one, but also consolidated cargoes. The total number of, however, now the total number of how many times you can load, unload, it's limited to 4. But yes, you can have grouped consignments. Okay, so I see that most of the questions are on TIR. We have still. Okay, can we say TIR is an insurance for goods carried by road? Well, it is a guarantee. Now, whether it is an insurance, I mean, it can apply on the goods themselves, but the whole approach behind the TIR is basically to actually consolidate the guarantee process rather than divide it on several jurisdictions or several territories. Now, the approach that we have here is that in the grouping, there is still a limitation in value. So you need to be always careful that in some countries, I think it's 50,000 in the UAE, $50,000. But in other countries, it can be up to 100,000 euros. But all in all, yes, I mean, it constitutes this guarantee, but maybe depending on the type of consignment, you want to increase the extent of the coverage by additional or subsequent additional policies. So with this, I think I think we reached the top of the hour, so we will follow up on the rest of the questions probably on individual basis. Thanks a lot, everybody, for the time that you spent with us. It has been a great pleasure to provide this first customs and trade presentation. Hopefully more to come. Please stay in touch, and wishing you a great continuation of the day. Thanks a lot. Here, bye.